As the situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate, the images of starving children now sadly accompany those of indiscriminate slaughter and people driven from their homes. As Israel continues to bombard the Gaza Strip and blockade to those most in need, my final guest tonight travelled to the Gaza border a couple of weeks ago to see firsthand the desperate situation on the ground. Here to tell us more, would you please welcome former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson. Welcome to the show. I mean, you know, you've got a bit of a jig in your step. You've got.
I'll tell you why I did that.
Yeah.
Because I watched Archbishop Tutu. He was first chair of the elders that I joined when Nelson Mandela brought us together in 2007, and he would make himself a bit ridiculous, which I've just done, and then he would, at a certain point, come in with a really serious point when people had laughed. And they'd kind of, you know, been with him. And it was so clever. And I kind of learned. So I very often now when I come in, I'm very shy. It's not me that does it. It's Archbishop Tutu that kind of, you know, drags me by the tail and brings me in.
he's doing his stuff. I mean, look, from that reaction, I'm thinking we've got a presidential election in November. You only served one term. Technically, nothing to stop you running again. You're looking sprightly. Any interest?
I can categorically say, no, thank you,
okay.
No.
Okay.
It was a great honour.
You changed Ireland whenever you were president. You're still fighting for change around the world. You're just back from the Egypt-Gaza border. Why did you feel the need to see that firsthand?
I thought it was important that two of us as elders, Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and myself, would go...
This is you here, yeah?
Yeah, would go to... through Egypt to the Rafah border and speak truth to power. There was denial on the Israeli side, and the media were doing a kind of believing one and believing the other. People were confused, and it was important to tell the truth. And we were helped by the Egyptians. We met the foreign minister on the day we arrived, and the following day the Egyptians lent a plane to the elders to take us down, first of all, to a big warehouse storage area called Al Arish, where the airport was, where we flew in. And honestly, the amount of stuff that is there ready to go into Gaza.
And just can't get in.
Can't get in. Food, medicines, but also wheelchairs, cylinders, tents. You wouldn't name it. I mean, in the morning, Gaza could be changed. It's all there.
This is heartbreaking. I mean, you also were talking to, some of the truck drivers. You were trying to bring this stuff in. I mean, what happens when they try to bring it in?
Well, unfortunately, on one side, you have enormous effort, and there's great cooperation, I have to say, I'm glad to say, between the UN agencies that are trying very hard, the Egyptian Red Cross, and the Egyptian governor of the state. I mean, they're all pressing to get this in because they know what's happening on the other side. People are literally starving, and babies are starving and dying. And it's kind of shocking then to go from Al Arish, about half an hour's car journey, to the border itself, which is completely silent. It's completely empty. Nobody goes in and out by that Rafah border. At the side, the trucks go in a special route the Israelis have, and before they go in, they're told what they have to do, and they are very meticulous in obeying all the instructions, and then 70% of the lorries are turned back.
Still turned back.
Yeah. So it's deliberate. It's a deliberate famine in our time. It's been officially declared a famine, and that's very technical and very serious.
And the UN has said it's a man-made famine,
yes.
Yet the Israelis, they're saying that they're not stopping
well,
this aid.
All I can say is the elders affirm it is a man-made famine and it is an unfolding genocide, and I really feel, I don't know, I feel very sorry in many ways for the people of Israel. It's a right-wing extremist, not right-wing's the wrong word, extremist government. led by a bad prime minister, Netanyahu, doesn't want to make peace, because if he makes peace, he will lose his majority. He will then find himself on trial for corruption. That's the truth of it.
No.
So it's a very sad situation, because the Israeli people are traumatized by the terrible attacks of the 7th of October of 2023 and the taking of hostages. You know, the taking of hostages in any population, but particularly the Israeli population, is a very devastating thing, and it's every day, every moment of every day, they're conscious of it. So, you know, and many of them are now protesting and calling for a peace process, and the peace process is on the table. It could happen. And actually, I'm heartened by some of the things I read today, to be honest. I read about the UN General Assembly has just passed an important resolution that supports the New York Declaration, which was the last time I was in New York. I spoke in the UN itself as an elder during a meeting co-hosted by France and Saudi Arabia, but a lot of countries, including Ireland, were involved in working groups on the nuts and bolts of what should happen for a two-state solution. And that has now been totally affirmed by the General Assembly. And you know, the Security Council passed a resolution condemning the killing of the Hamas. They attempted to kill the leaders, but I don't think they got the leaders in Qatar, which was, of course, contrary to all international law.
You know, you're describing normal politics there. There's so many people that are outraged.
I'm not describing normal politics.
No, sorry, Mayor. I'm talking about, you know, you're talking about UN resolutions,
yeah.
and you're talking about people going through, the normal channels that they would. Yet, it doesn't seem to be making a difference. So many people are outraged by what's going on. You know, is it a failure of the UN that the people of Gaza cannot be helped? It's
not a failure of the UN. It's a failure of political will on the part of very few. In particular, obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also, you know, President Trump could have a huge influence, and it's on the table at the moment. It's on the table to have a resolution, to have a real ceasefire, to release half or maybe all of the hostages, hopefully all of the hostages, and deal with the situation and deal with it in the way that the New York Declaration has said and that the General Assembly is holding. You know, it's isolating two countries, basically, the United States and Israel, as responsible for a famine and an unfolding genocide. Is that the legacy that people want in those countries?
You know, you're talking about genocide there. It's, you know, a man-made famine. Benjamin Netanyahu appears to be the man responsible for that famine.
But others are complicit in not doing enough.
Would you know, he's denying that it is genocide. I mean, well, is that credible?
Only a court will ultimately determine.
Would you like to see him in front of a court?
Well, he is in front of a court, the International Court of Justice, thanks to the bravery of South Africa taking that case, which Ireland supports. And that's important. It's important that we use all the levers possible. The real levers are to stop the armaments completely. And of course, the United States would be the big country that could do that. But some European countries should also be stopping the armaments, and in particular, the trade. I'm glad that at last Ursula von der Leyen has said that the EU should remove the preferential trade pillar of or suspend the preferential trade pillar of the EU-Israel association. Unfortunately, it takes a 2/3 majority, and we still haven't got there. I have to say, I feel a bit ashamed as an EU citizen, if you like. I do. That the EU that speaks about human rights, that talks the talk, cannot bring itself. It's quite disturbing at this stage. But at the same time, I think I'm going to the UN in a fortnight's time for the UN General Assembly, the UNGA week, as they call it, and it's a climate week as well. So I have two things to think about. And I think that there may be important steps taken there by all of the world together, apart from the United States and Israel. You know.
I mean, if you look at, you're saying apart from America, that is the key to this. I mean,
yes.
America is, of course...
And I think the more America is isolated, the more thoughtful Americans must begin to say, we have to move on this.
But Donald Trump and the administration don't want to do that.
At the moment.
America is Israel's strongest ally. There are some people here at home that would say it's better to look after Ireland's economic interests and not raise your head above the parapet and not mention these things. Don't pass the Occupied Territories Bill to protect Ireland's trade with America. I mean, what would you say to people like that?
Well, I think it's really important that we have in our DNA a memory of a famine. Funnily enough, it's one of the memories that I have when I was president. I marked 3 years of the famine, the 150th anniversary, from 1995, 1996, 1997. And in 1997, I went to Oklahoma to thank the Choctaw people for having subscribed and helped the Irish famine victims in 1847. They raised $173 in 1847 and sent it. That's the world that we have to still believe in, the values that we have to believe in, the humanitarian values. And we have it in our DNA, and I think, I hear other leaders, and I hear a lot of them, and I heard it in Egypt, gratitude towards Ireland for their leadership, or our leadership in Europe. So I'm proud of what the country's done.
With everything going on in the rest of the world, you mentioned climate change. I know you're very passionate about it. It kind of appears to have been forgotten.
Yeah, that's another thing. I'm glad during this Climate Week in New York, we'll have an opportunity to remind the world that this is the big crisis of our time. And it's a crisis. It's a climate and nature crisis. And we all need to be in crisis mode. And I think a lot of Irish people understand that and wonder almost why we're not making more steps. And if we get over the hump, if I could put it that way, and get out of fossil fuel into clean energy, the world will be much better. First of all, energy will be much cheaper. Jobs will be different kind of better jobs, green jobs. And we'll be on the right side. It's a political decision. And we'll be using a lot of energy in New York and then afterwards at COP30 in Belém in November to really turn things round for the world. Again, there was a wonderful advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice. I mean, I just listened to this opinion, and every word of it was like balm to my soul, because it was saying precisely what is needed to be said, that countries have to commit, that it is absolutely wrong not to, that they must align to bring us to a world out of fossil fuel. It's interesting that we had such excitement in Paris 10 years ago for the Paris Climate Agreement. I was in the hall when the gavel came down, and the emotion was unbelievable.
And now, 10 years later, it feels that's gone. Yeah,
so we've got to rekindle that sense, because unfortunately, in the meantime, the situation is not getting better. The Paris Agreement and the whole work of the conferences on climate has brought us forward from a world where we might have been heading for a world of 5 degrees centigrade of warming above pre-industrial standards, which would be catastrophic totally, to now somewhere between 2.5 and 2.7 degrees above. But we have to stay below 2 degrees and work to stay at 1.5 degrees in order for so many people alive today and all the children born today and young children to have a reasonable life. Look at the wildfires. Look at the costs of them. Look at the costs in the United States. President Trump considers himself very transactional. You know, he's a deal maker. If he'd only take into account the costs to the United States already of what is happening because of fossil fuel, the fires, the floods, the hurricanes, it's unbelievable, the cost. You can't insure now in Florida. You can't insure in Los Angeles. Where are we going?
You're talking there about President Trump and what you'd like to see him do. We're going to be electing a new president ourselves here later this year.
You're not going to ask me anything about that, are you?
I mean...
You wouldn't dare.
I was just hoping you might have... would you have any advice for whoever takes that office?
Well, not any advice as such, but I can tell you why I felt so lucky. I had, from the very start, a wonderful special advisor, Bride Rosney. And she told me, because she was a true friend, she told me the things I needed to hear, not the things I wanted to hear. And she was always right. She was even right about the documentary, which a number of people will have seen. I didn't want to do that documentary, far from it. I wanted to stay private as much as I could. And she said, no, you've had a good life, you've done some things, you've made mistakes, we'll put those in too. And of course, it is important that we have a way of seeing how Ireland has changed. And that documentary helped, and I was a part of it. But actually, so many other people were a part of it. And it was important that we took stock of that.
On behalf of us all, thank you for helping to change Ireland, and thank you for continuing the fight and trying to change some of the things that we all know are wrong in this world. And thanks for joining us. Mary Robbins.
Thank you.